to have a very brief rant on translating, in particular in relation to ancient languages. Now, I'm sure we've all read something that's been translated at some point, be it a novel, be it like a post that's just on the auto-translate, anything like that. And oftentimes, or at least, I'm sure at least once, you've come across a sentence where you're like, why on earth has that been translated like that? What on earth does it mean? And oftentimes it's a result of there being like a culturally specific idiom or statement that is absolutely nonsensical in English but makes perfect sense in its, original language. And this is why, in particular with ancient languages where there's already this significant cultural divide, I think it's really handy, and this is by no means a revolutionary opinion, but it's just nice to be able to sort of logic out the grammar and understand why the translator has translated it as they have, even if you're not translating the whole thing yourself. And again, this is probably not revolutionary, but I just sort of wanted to work through an example. Also because my ancient Egyptian is really rusty and I need to work on it and remind myself of some of the basics. But I'm just going to take an example, like a little phrase from James P. Allen's translation of the instructions of Khadjemni's father Amtahotep, lines 8 to 9, 8 to 9 in Maxim 3. And I think the title is something along the lines of like how to behave when other people like overindulge. I'm probably butchering that title. I cannot remember it off the top of my head. Now this is going to be a sort of one take thing, so if I ramble, I apologize, but I'm not drawing out these hieroglyphs again. As you can tell, I do struggle, and yeah, I have not dedicated my life to learning how to inscribe hieroglyphs beautifully as many other scribes would. Though in this case, I imagine for this piece of literature, they were probably writing in hieratic. It's like a cursive form of hieroglyphs, which I cannot read. So thank God Alan put the full hieroglyphs in his book. Anyway, so this line here, and I haven't put them on the right lines, respectively. This is meant to be on that same line, but and there's obviously more before and after and so on. I'm just like, anyway, that's besides the point. So Alan translates this part, if you drink with a drunkard. And it's nice to just sort of be able to think, okay, what parts mean what and where do they actually appear in the hieroglyphs? Now you might be wondering what this little in-between section is. And in between going from like full hieroglyphs to translation, there's this step called transliteration, whereby these signs have often been assigned consonants, the ones that are acting as consonants, in order to sort of let you search a dictionary for words and so on and understand where, so you can also reflect some of the grammatical things in it, like this is a suffix pronoun attached to suri, which obviously is not reflected in the hieroglyphs because they didn't have punctuation as we do. So it lets you see the grammatical structure, lets you sort of identify words, search them up in a dictionary if need be. Now, the fun thing about hieroglyphs is that sometimes they would carry a consonant value, other ones would sort of confirm the meaning of a word. Now, it starts with this particle ir, so now, mind you, these hieroglyphs are being read in this direction, so you read into the faces. So ir, I'll put them in little boxes so it's easier to see. Ir, which obviously is this sort of like particle that's starting it, so putting it in like the if, da-da-da-da-da. So if, this is our if here. I'll change to a different color now. Suri, not serui, suri, so drink, and then this suffix pronoun, this K, means you. Now, this suffix pronoun, and if this could stop focusing, this suffix pronoun, the .k, is like a masculine you, so a masculine second person. Now in English we don't differentiate between you feminine and you masculine, but in many other languages they do. So this is you masculine that's being attached as a suffix on to this verb, meaning to drink. And what you'll notice here is there's one, so it goes from this folded bolt of cloth, which doesn't really look like that bird, I. And then you've got a little seated man here, obviously terribly drawn on my behalf, but he's actually got his hand to his mouth. So this is acting as a determinative, sort of confirming that the meaning of the word is sort of drinking, that act of drinking. And then this has the value of, like the consonant value, we've assigned it S. This is, I think it's su, like SW. So what it'll sometimes do is it'll confirm sort of the first or second value of they're called biliteral signs. There's also triliteral, which have 2 consonants assigned, or in the case of triliteral, 3 consonants. And what will happen is that sometimes it'll have a confirming sign, let's say, to say, okay, it's S, but it's not S, you don't transliterate it as SS or I. That first S is just sort of confirming the value. Anyway, so S, SW, and then I think it's also called a yod. Anyway, so suri, and typically because there's no vowels that are included, obviously we don't really know what sounds would have been wedged in between there, because that's not obviously not preserved in the writing, especially for like a Middle Egyptian. So typically in pronouncing them, what Egyptologists do is they just insert like a little E sound in between consonants when they're like sort of jutting up against each other. So it's suri ek. And then you've got this word hena. Sorry, let me get another color. Hena. And technically this means together with. So blank together with blank. And obviously you don't need to write, if you drink together with a drunkard. It's sometimes translated as together with, but it can also just be translated as with. That's the general sort of sentiment. So that's that little cluster of signs here, where, and there's actually a dot under that H that you can't really see because it's multiple H sounds, which is great. So this one is the h, n, and then the aleph. And then, of course, you've got your last word here. And let's go back to the green for this one. Tehu, tehu. And so this is the teh, this is the te, h, u. And then these two here, I believe, are determinative, not determinative, like confirming the meaning of the word, I think, unless that has a value and I've just forgotten it, which is also possible. And again, you can see it's got a little seated man there. He doesn't have his hand to his mouth, but he does. There is that little jar there. So you can understand sort of where, like what parts mean what and what his sort of reasoning for this translation is. So if that particle there, if you drink together with a drunkard, and so on, so on. So there's like a second part to this clause, which I haven't written out because I'm not good at drawing hieroglyphs. But even if you're not translating it yourself, like this is a very simple sentence, so you could probably translate it yourself. But even if you're not translating it, it's handy to be able to break it down like this, because then if you're like, well, I don't agree with this translation for X, Y, Z reasons, or this translation doesn't feel right, you can sort of go back and sort of logic out, okay, what's he taken what part to mean? Does that make sense? Okay, I understand what it's trying to say now. Anyway, that was just like a little ramble and me trying to convince myself that I haven't lost the 2 years I spent learning ancient Egyptian, but definitely a bit rusty. This is quite a simple phrase, but they do get a lot more complex, especially sort of with the verbs, and once you get the verb, like the verbs in there, like multiple verbs and so on and so on, gets a little bit more hectic, but being able to sort of recognize the little clusters, and even just sort of being able to pull this line, this short line out from the actual translation, because obviously there was a whole bunch of hieroglyphs before it, a whole bunch of hieroglyphs after it, but in being able to identify ir, and then suriek, hena, tehu, being able to identify that means you can actually pinpoint, all right, this is the specific part that he's translated to mean this, because otherwise it just gets very, very hectic trying to identify. Anyway, that's my ramble on translation.